Dear panelists, you have heard Dr. Israr's discourse on a very vast subject. It has covered centuries, in fact, the arrival of Islam in the subcontinents, and then its development, and finally, the creation of Pakistan in 1947 and its aftermath. Now the floor is open for discussion.
I have a point of clarification initially. You mentioned that in the 20th century there are 4 mujaddids.
First of all, I never used the word mujaddid for them. Mujaddids were Ahmad Sarhandi, Shah Waliullah, Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi, and Sheikhul Hind Molana Mahmud Hassan.
Right.
But 4, you may say, da'is and callers.
That's what I was not sure about. Now, the question that I have is a comparative one, in relation to Badi Zaman Said Nursi in the Ottoman Empire, who was born in 1877. And briefly about his life is that after World War I, after the defeat of the Ottoman army, he began to preach the idea that the only destiny for Islam in the Ottoman Empire, in Turkey, as well as in the Muslim world, is the preservation of faith, Imaan, as you have suggested. He has the same ideas about Imaan. And that's why he went in full force to preserve Imaan in a secular Turkish republic, the Turkish Republic of Turkey that was established after 1924. And he never thought about re-establishing the Islamic socio-economic and political system. To him, that was part of his old days, the old Said. But his major intention was to preserve Iman in a new age. Now, you seem to be somewhat different. You seem to be saying that
I'm very much different.
Iman alone is not sufficient, but it has to be reconstituted in the context of the state. Whereas for Said Nursi, he is saying that Iman without an Islamic state can be preserved, even in the most radical secular entity, such as the Turkish Republic of Turkey today.
Yes, the last thing that you have said, I agree 100%. Iman can be preserved. We have the example of the Ashab al-Kahf, people of the cave. They saved their Iman by running off from the society and hiding in a cave for 300 years, more than 300 years. So I would compare Sayyid Nursi's movement to Deobandis, the ulama, the big people who based Deoband. They wanted to preserve the Iman as Aqidah and the knowledge of Quran and Sunnah. But this phenomenon is actually exclusive. Iqbal was the first to revive the concept of Islam as a deen. And then, first attempt was made by Abul Kalam, second by Maududi. And it is progressing. And I quote the ayah from the Quran, for you especially, لَتَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ. The big purpose which was achieved by the Prophet in 20 years, that cannot be achieved in one generation now. لَتَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ. We shall rise from level to level to level. And now we are very, very near, very close to that final end, inshallah.
I'd like to ask you a question about science, natural science. But let me first say, I enjoyed your talk more than any other talks which I've also enjoyed. I thought this was the best one for me that was, so thank you for that. It was a rich discussion. I want to ask you about the role of Western science. Science is the very basis of our technology, and the philosophy behind science and technology is secular. It has a long history of becoming secular. It is the dominance of our science and technology which has led to our imperial domination. Without it, we would not have achieved that domination over some 200 or 300 years, which has happened. And it is the ownership and control of that science and technology which forms today the military technology which is still totally dominant around the world. So my question is around the role of science in your Renaissance, in the Islamic Renaissance. You have mentioned it time and again in this talk today, but it is not clear to me what relation Islam has to Western natural science.
In one of my previous talks, I specified there are two knowledges. One is acquired, one is revealed. And this acquired knowledge is also Islamic, because we are studying the universe, which is the work of God. The Quran, the scriptures, the Torah, the Bible, they are words of God. So there is no distinction or agreement between the two. If we find that there is someone, it is due to our knowledge, lack of knowledge. So we have to adopt it. It is not un-Islamic at all. It is Islamic. But thought governs this. This is not the governing force. Governing force is the thought, the ideas.
May I come in here? See, nothing wrong with science and technology per se, as such. But when it becomes scientism, a total metaphysical worldview, that only science can explain everything, then that is something un-Islamic, un-Quranic.
Can I ask a question about at various points in your talk you hinted to your view of Hinduism and the relationships between Hinduism and Islam in India over the last 200 or so years in particular. And you talked about, you were critical of Hinduism for at least two reasons. One is that it has a propensity to always assimilate another religion and make it its own and eradicate the distinctiveness of the other. And your second criticism was that there was a deep antagonism amongst Hindus in India towards Islam, which is one of the major arguments for partition. Can you just locate those feelings towards Hinduism in a broader context for me? Was it colonialism? Was it the arrival of the British which led to these problematic relationships, an awkward relationship between Hindus and Muslims, and before that perhaps there was more constructive coexistence? Or have there always been major antagonisms between Muslims and Hindus in India?
My response would be, first of all, Hinduism is not a religion. It's a conglomeration of very different beliefs. Hindus themselves say it's not religion, it's a culture. And all who live in India should adopt that culture. They shouldn't maintain their separate identity. When they live in India, they are the sons of the soil now, so they should be integrated into the culture. Now, as regarding the opposition to Pakistan, it had two factors. Number one, dislike of Islam, but more so was division of India. Bharat was very sacred to them. They call it Mother Bharat, Bharat Mata. How come? India will be divided? No. So that was more effective. But there was extremist Hindus who had the idea to exterminate Islam and Muslims from this soil. They are foreign elements. They have to go out. There have been slogans in Bombay, Musalman ke do asthan, Pakistan ya Qabristan. Muslims of India have two places to go, either to graveyard or to Pakistan. Go away from here now. So it was a religious affair also. They had started a movement of converting Muslims to Hinduism in the regions where there was no Islamic knowledge. Some chief of the tribe accepted Islam, and now all the people, but they didn't even know the kalma. First, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad. Even that they couldn't pronounce. Especially the Mewatis, round about Delhi. So Tablighi Jamaat worked a lot for them. But they were converting them. So as to reclaim, they were from us, they must come back. Then the Britishers also, especially the conservatives in England, they broadened this gap and increased the enmity due to their policy of divide and rule, divide and rule. If they come together, they'll throw us out. Let them fight each other, divide and rule. So the oil was added to this burning fire by this British policy. And when they left a bone of contention between Bharat and Pakistan, Kashmir. Go on fighting, go on fighting, go on fighting. Remain friends, our friends, both of you, but fight each other. Go on, go on. The same continuation of the divide and rule policy.
I have a couple of things to say. Firstly, I want to go back to your discourse this morning, and very interesting, very informative. What I was trying to reflect on was this, that we are looking at, in this period of 150 years, we are looking at Iqbal, we are looking at the thought of Azad, we are looking at the thought of Maududi, yourself, and others. And I go back to the time of around when Iqbal was born, 1870s. And 1870s, I think in some ways also becomes a historically very significant period in the British rule, because that is a time when practically, I think in this northwest segment of the country, there are several movements that emerged which primarily were a response to the British presence, the British dominance. They did not like the dominance. They were also a response to the Christian missionaries and their work. They, maybe to some extent, were also protective against the influences of the faiths which already existed within the society. But primarily, I think they were defensive. And in that movement, there was amongst the Hindus, the Arya Samaj movement, which started, which became very strong. The Sikhs had the Singh Sabha movement, which started. Before that, it was the Nirankaris and the Kukas. So the first, 1871, the Kukas movement, the Qadianis and the Aligarh movement. All these are the movements which started at that point of time. I see there a trend of the thought that initially emerges from, which is, I think, informed through the works of all of them, like Iqbal and Azad and even Maududi, where the thought was to find a model or to find identity within a pluralistic setting. You see, now somewhere around 1920, 1930, that period is significant because the rift between Gandhi and Jinnah, which led then ultimately to emergence of another kind of thought of separation. So I am wondering here that if we even go back to 1930 speech of Allama Iqbal, he is talking of a very broad concept of federalism. He is talking of a very broad concept of federalism, true federalism, where the regions have a certain level of freedom and liberty, but they live as a pluralistic entities. Is it possible, in your judgment or in your reflection, that if Nehru and Jinnah had got along, we would not be thinking of so many of these things here today.
Well, these ifs, they can have so many answers.
Yes.
And what I want to point out is that what you are saying about Iqbal is partially true. Because at that time, we could never think of independence from the Britishers. So what he was seeking at that time was the grouping of the provinces on the basis of population. So there should be one province of Muslim majority, So that was practical, pragmatic. But then he said in the same lecture, for me it is destiny that an independent Islam Muslim state will exist and be established in the northwest of India. But that was not a proposal. On those conditions, nobody could think that Britishers will go. Had not the Second World War happened, the Britishers would have never gone from here.
Dr. Mumtaz.
Israr Sahib, you left the Jamaat-e-Islami in the 1950s, and I happen to have read your statement that you delivered at Machigo Ijtima, and I must admit that it's the most articulate and profoundly argued statement with wit and sarcasm and also with passion. And even today, I think it remains probably the best critique of the turnaround of the Jamaat-e-Islami. I have two questions. Did you at any time after you left the Jamaat had the opportunity of meeting Molana Maududi and discussing with him the issues that divided you? Secondly, at the same time or around that time, both Molana Wahiduddin Ahmed and Molana Amin Hassan Islai also left the Jamaat-e-Islami. How is your position different from the position taken by these two other stalwarts of the Jamaat? And thirdly,
it will be difficult for me to remember.
Go ahead. But please do remember I have a third question.
Not a question paper. First of all, I didn't meet Molana Maududi for 5 years after leaving Jamaat-e-Islami. But in 1962, I was going for Hajj for the first time. So I came over to Lahore from Montgomery. 1962. That was my first Hajj. So I came and talked to him. That Molana, my difference stands where it was. Rather, it is more intense. But I love you. I'm thankful to you because you gave us the idea and all that. So I want that you also clear your heart from my side. He said, I have nothing in my heart against you. But then, that was not the time for discussion. I tried to discuss because when I went to Hajj, he also came because, the founding session of Rabatatul Alam al-Islami was going to be held. After I left, he was invited. So I met him in Makkah, in Mina, in Medina, and wanted to discuss with him. I said, Molana, do you not up till now think that some mistake has been? So he was furious. He said, the same question I'm asking you. Have you not up till now understood your mistake? So I stopped. Number one. Number two was Wahiduddin and Molana Islai. Molana Islai was 100% in agreement with me. But his position was that had Molana Maududi kept the environment of mutual consultation, we would not have left Jamaat-e-Islami. So leaving Jamaat is something else and the difference of opinion is something else. As for Wahiduddin Khan, he actually attacks the basic thought of Iqamatul-Din. So he has differed and gone away from the basic ideology of Jamaat-e-Islami, but not Molana Islai.
Thank you.
I also wish to say that I enjoyed today's talk a great deal and I learned from it. I understand even better, I think, your desire for and your aim to have an Islamic state. And I understand better also why you do not accept Muslims and really Islam only being given in the states rights to practice their religion and other human rights, but not having full political rights, indeed, not having their own Islamic State. And I certainly do not expect you to change your views on this whatsoever. I wonder, however, if you can fully understand why non-Muslims would almost certainly oppose any kind of Islamic State, especially one in which they live, and did not grant them political rights as well as human rights on an equal basis with Muslims. And also, given that you say, yes, you want an Islamic State, you're saying now, first and foremost in Pakistan, but the real idea is to have either Islamic states around the world or to have the world become an Islamic state, then I wonder if you can understand why for a good many of us non-Muslims, that would only mean difficulty, first of all, but also probably conflict, because the rights would not be given fully. And if you're thinking of a world Islamic state, then that would be conflict throughout the whole of the world. So I'm wondering if you can understand that, which I think you can, but then what would you say about that? How would then conflict cease to be as long as there were non-Muslims in this world?
First of all, we hope that when a model Islamic State is established somewhere on this globe, most of the humanity and mankind will see the truth with their own eyes and accept Islam. But I don't say that the conflict will be over. There will remain certain persons, but in the revolutionary terminology, all the people in Russia were not communists. But they had to accept the communist order. It is the revolutionary force that establishes its order of its choice, and the other have to obey. This is the rule. This has been the rule throughout. But let me quote about Muslims, not to speak of Islam. About Islam, let me quote an incident. Omar, the second caliph, went to Damascus. And there he saw a Jew begging in the market. He called the governor for explanation. How come? When he was young, you were taking jizya from him, and now when he is old, you have thrown him into the street to beg. Fix the allowance for him, just like the allowances for Muslims. This is Islam. The basic right that the Islamic Caliphate underwrites all the basic human necessities for every citizen. It covers the non-Muslims also. Number two, about the Muslim kingship. Let me quote Ben Gurion, what he said. The golden era of our diaspora was the Muslim Spain. In what a high position were the Jews over there?
One small comment there, if I may, and that's only this, that I think the way possibly lots of these golden eras have been defined are such that the golden era of the Indian history in the last millennium is considered to be Akbar's rule. Akbar's rule.
Yes. And the Muslim ascendancy was at its zenith during Akbar's rule.
No.
But Islam had gone.
Yes, that's what I mean. You see, so therefore, I think to try and relate the faith of the ruler to the golden era possibly could be erroneous.
But that is not our golden era.
Yeah,
that is not the golden era of Islam.
Not of Islam,
yes.
But for the people.
Ibrahim.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to draw our attention that the journal we edit in Hartwood Seminary in the past issue, the combined issue of July and October of last year, we published a special issue on Pakistan and Allama Maududi. And I'm sorry that we don't have a copy of that here, but we have like 13 major articles on Maududi and Pakistan, which are significant in many ways. Now, the question that I have is about two major events that you have referred to only briefly, the event of partition, the partition of India in 1947, and the consequence of the partition, the creation of an Indian nation state and a Pakistani nation state. Now I want to talk briefly about the nation state of Pakistan. If I understand you correctly, you are saying from your own perspective that the nation state of Pakistan that has come on the heels of partition has not established through Islamic ideas and through Islamic rule and through Imam. So in that sense, for the past 56 years or so, the nation state of Pakistan has not been a true Islamic state. That's
100% agree.
okay. Therefore, my question is, within the partition, at least 4 or 5 million innocent civilians were killed on both sides. Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, all sorts of innocent people. Now, was it worth it to kill so many people for a secular nation state of Pakistan that you disagree with?
Brother, I was not involved in that killing.
No, I'm not asking you. No, true. But the fact is,
And neither the leaders of Congress or Muslim League
but that doesn't
would
matter.
envisage that this would happen.
yeah, but partition, the whole idea of partition, gave rise to so much killing within India and Pakistan.
Yes,
But-
it's a sad
And from an
affair.
Islamic perspective, that's not worth it to establish a non-Islamic state later on.
I agree.
We have to stop here.
I have two questions. I want to learn, you see, but I may ask private.
One quick question.
Yes. The first question is how do you consider Imam Rabbani and Shah Dahlawi in your...
In Mujaddid, I have named the first Mujaddid.
Yeah, Mujaddid, but I think, as far as I know, maybe my knowledge is a very little and limited. Imam Rabbani, he didn't aim an Islamic state. So, how do you consider Imam Rabbani's views?
I have said, that the Islam during these centuries was gradually reduced to mazhab.
Yeah, I mean,
And
when you consider his
mysticism
views
is
and
also
ideas,
private affair.
yes,
Iman is also a private personal affair.
yeah,
Personal piety.
Uh-huh.
That was the goal of most of the Mujaddids.
yes, okay. Thank you, brother.
Dear panelists,
Only one fact. In terms of Islamic intellectual history in South Asia, Shah Waliullah of Delhi and Imam Rabbani Sirhindi, we have one major Canadian Muslim woman scholar on that in the USA, Professor Marcia Hermanson, who's known to some of our faculty in the seminary. She's somewhere in Chicago, not at the University of Chicago.
She's
DePaul University, who has done tremendous work on Sirhindi, especially on Loyola University. Thank you. Yes. So we are doing something. Thank you so much.